Okay, so I'm back. Sorry about that, but sinuses prevailed. Um, there's first of all there was confusion about LabSim. I don't know. It might have been my mistake. I was kind of down for the count on Monday and Tuesday, so um, I've extended the LabSim 10.0 screenshots until next week Monday. Okay, so some of you already submitted them. I thought 10.0 was due the last week, but maybe I don't know. I was in a kind of a haze and fog, so I wasn't thinking right. But anyways, I've had some blowback or feedback, so the 10.0 screenshots are due next week Monday. All right. But I've also opened up the Network Pro exam that you'll be taking on in LabSim. Okay, so I'm logged in as uh, how do you say it? Chayaz. I'm sorry, I should know that by now. Um, Chayaz here. He's a student in the in-person class because I wanted to show you what it looked like as a student rather than an instructor. So you should have available to you this ITNet 101 Network Communications. You should have one assessment exam available to you. And if you click on that, that's where you would go to take the Network Pro exam. So you would click on Begin, and you would begin the Network Pro exam. Now remember, this is a one-shot deal. Okay, so it gives you have 90 minutes to complete it, and it's a one-shot deal. So I can't, if you take it and you fall off the internet or something happens, there's nothing I can do. I can't reinitiate it. I can't do any of that kind of stuff because TestOut only gives you one exam per certification per LabSim. So when you sit down to take this, you need to be prepared to sit there and finish it, and you need to make sure that you're on a stable internet connection, and you need to make sure that you're not going to be interrupted and you're going to have time. So you basically have between now and May 20th to complete that. Okay? So you have 2 weeks to complete it. Now remember, in the LabSim, when you go into the LabSim, there's 2 sections down here at the bottom. One is the Network Pro certification. This is what you'll be taking. Okay? So you can go and practice and go through this as many times as you would like. All right, so they even have a certification exam here that kind of mimics what you would be doing in the Network Pro exam. So again, between now and May 20th, you can practice and go through this stuff as many times as you would like. And then when you're ready to take it, you begin the Network Pro exam. The CompTIA practice exams are here. So this is the Network Plus practice exams. These are not they're not simulation based. They're multiple choice questions. So when you take the Network Plus exam, if you choose to, that would be a different exam than the Network Pro. Okay? Remember, the Network Pro is an exam that is by TestOut, but if you go to TestOut's website, they have a series of competencies that you would be able to demonstrate. So if you pass the Network Pro exam, now last semester I had problems, and I'd contact TestOut now one more time, but what ends up happening is I just send you a PDF file if you pass it and you have it. But you could still put this on your LinkedIn profile or your resume, and if people ask, well, what are the competencies, you could point to the website to the competencies that I passed this. The problem is the Network Pro exam from TestOut isn't recognized. You know what I'm saying? I mean, CompTIA just got into the ball game really early on, and they became the kind of certification credentialing agency for IT. I mean, but there's nothing really special about it. It's just the fact that that's what happened. So if you're interested in purchasing a voucher for the Network Plus exam, then you should be doing that with me in the next couple. Today I'd be fine. Afterwards, if you have a credit card and you want a Network Plus voucher, I can purchase it for you next week or the following week. If you don't have a credit card, then you need to bring me a bank money order for $125, and I would put it on my credit card. Regarding online students need to email me and set up a time that I can call them on the phone and get the credit card information and purchase the voucher for you. The Network Plus voucher, right, an exam, is taken outside of the construct of this course. So it's taken at one of the testing centers. You sign up through it through Pearson VUE, and you take it on your own. And it has nothing to do with your grade in this class. The Test Out Pro does. If you look at the syllabus, it's part of your grade for this class. If you get above 80% and pass, you get the full percentage point. If you get something lower, that's the amount of points that you would get for the exam. Okay. So all of these exams basically are pass-fail. Both the Network Plus and the Network Pro exam are basically pass-fail, although I give you a score if you don't pass it for purposes of your grade. Okay? See what I'm saying? Everybody got that? Understand that? Okay? So remember, the important thing is that between now and the 20th, you need to take that Network Pro exam that shows up in your lab sim. Okay? Take it on your own. You can prepare for it, and you have been preparing for it. If you've done the lab sim religiously, you've been preparing for the Network Pro exam. Okay? So it's not like it's going to be very similar. But my suggestion would be to take that practice test a couple of times so you get familiar with what you might see on the Network Pro. But if you've done the lab sim and you've put in the time, which most of you have for the most part, the people that are here sitting in class and the people that probably are listening to the screencast, you're already pretty close to doing it. It should not be all that tough for you to get prepared and take the final exam. So after the 10.0 lab sim screenshots, if you've completed those, this is all you have left to do in the course, is finish this last Network Pro exam. Okay? So, because the last day we meet is the 20th, right? So, yes. Yes. Well, yes. I mean, that's the most convenient way to get it, is through me. We have a deal because we're associated. We have a deal with. I mean, not a deal, but we're a CompTIA Academy or whatever, where the instructors can give out or can purchase these discounted. If you wanted to take the Network Plus on your own and just signed up for it by default, going to Pearson VUE, it would be $250. Okay, so you'd want to purchase that voucher. Is good for a year. But my suggestion, again, I'll say this over and over and over again, and I know I sound like a broken record, but if you're serious about getting certified in the Network Plus, which again I suggest to all IT students as being one of the first professional certification exams you can take, partially because I don't want to say it's the easiest, but it's one exam and you get certified. If you took the A+, the A+ is 2 exams to get certified. So naturally the A+ would be harder. The CompT exams in general, both the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, in general are easier than like the CCNA or the Microsoft exams. So if you've never tried a certification exam before, my suggestion is always to cut your teeth on the Network Plus. It also provides some good bang for the buck, because if you get Network Plus certified, some of that content will bleed over to CCNA. And most people in the networking program don't want to be, the A Plus is good, but you don't want to be PC techs. You want to be network admins. So the Network Plus one is probably more appropriate for that role than the A Plus. I'm not saying the A Plus would hurt you. I'm saying if you can get them all, that's great. But if you're prioritizing, my suggestion always is if you can come out of MATC with a Network Plus, the CCNA, and maybe a Microsoft exam or the VCP and VMware, you'd be golden. Okay? And like I said, the way I structured this class was to hopefully promote that, because again, if you've spent adequate time in this class going through the lab sim, learning the material, coming to class, all that kind of stuff, watching CBT Nuggets, you're 75% of the way there to passing the Network Plus exam. The problem is I have done nothing in this class to force regurgitation or memorization. But the reality is by doing it, you've already digested a lot of it. So to go and memorize certain things, my guess would be most people that I sat down and I forced you to take a Network Plus exam, for most of you, the majority of time, you'd be able to rule out two answers automatically. And then you'd be looking at two different answers and either guessing or making an educated guess between the two answers. And really that comes down to memorization, right? So if they're asking you what the cable length is or this or that or, what's the standard for wireless and, that's just a matter of getting it in your head and memorized. And that's the purpose of those practice exams in the CompTIA section of the lab sim. People who can score on this practice exam right here for the Network Plus Lab Sim, people who can continually take this and score above 85%, this is a higher passing score than is required on the Network Plus exam. So even if you're scoring around 85 or 90% on consistently taking the Network Plus practice exam, people have told me who have passed that you have no problem passing the Network Plus exam. Okay. And again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I've had students always come back to me and they said, Tony, you were right. I don't know why I just didn't take it. Even though it had been a lot of work, I don't know why I just didn't try to take it as soon as I got out of your class. Because I did all the work, and if I would have just sat down and pounded it out for a month in memorization, I'd have been taking it in June and I would have gotten my cert and I'd be done. Now I'm forced to go back and review all that and try to go back, and that's taken for granted that if the competencies didn't change for the Network Plus, but that's just recently changed. Okay. So any questions on that? On what you're going to be doing, especially for the class? Yeah, I offer them up to the last day of class, right? Yeah. So this week, next week, and the following week, if you want to purchase it. And for the online students, you should email me directly. Send me your phone number and times that you would be available for me to call you, and we can conduct the transaction over the phone. All right. Any questions? Okay. I'll log off of this. Okay, back to VMware. So just to recap where we kind of left off, we left off last week, or 2 weeks ago, we left off by, we have our machines created, and what we did was we installed Active Directory on the server machine, and that's where we left off. So everybody, to double check, if you go to your server machine, you should click the Start menu, click Administrative Tools, and you should see Active Directory for Domains and Trust, Active Directory Sites and Services, Active Directory Users and Computers. And that means we installed Active Directory. If I go to my computer and I right-click and go to Properties, what you'll notice now is that this machine is in a domain called dovercorp.com. Okay, and then here's the fully qualified domain name. Again, we have some weird Windows name on here. That's the name of this computer, right? And then .dovercorp.com. Okay, so we have that as the domain controller. It's not on your server. Okay, what if you right-click on Computer and go to Properties? Are you still part of a work group? Okay, then you didn't install it, or you're on a different machine. Are you sure you're on the Windows server that you're on? You logged in as yourself to the computer? Okay. Then you want to run DC promo again and walk through that installation of Active Directory. If you go to Start Computer and you right-click on it and go to Properties, you should see that your machine is part of the Dover Corp domain. Okay. But I mean, another way to check is by going to Administrative Tools. You should have Active Directory Domains and Trust, Active Directory Sites and Services, Active Directory Users and Computers. Okay. Now remember what I said before is that a domain controller, once we elevate a domain controller in Windows, it's like every other domain controller on the network. It contains a full working copy of Active Directory. Okay? And what Windows will do is Windows will, mostly on basically all enterprise networks, you would have multiple domain controllers to provide multiple redundancy for your services. And remember, the big service that a domain controller plays is that it is the server that authenticates the users and gives the rights and permissions to the resources on the network to users or groups of users. I mean, it's really, in a way, it's that simple. I mean, that's what we're doing. I mean, I opened the class with this. I said, what you end up doing as an administrator is you're responsible for deciding and then implementing who has access to what resources on an enterprise network, right? I mean, it's that simple. Not everybody, right, would have access to everything on the network. And that's what you would do. Actually, when we talk about security next week, the real way to think about security on a network is everybody starts off with what? Access to what? What does everybody have access to? Something? Nothing? Everything? If I was going to start a network from scratch and I was thinking about security, right? Nothing, right? Everybody would start with access to nothing, right? And then it would be up to the administrator to the decision would then be to give access. One of the big security, we'll segue into security next week, but one of the big issues with security is that people end up having access to things they don't need access to, or too much access. Okay? And that's a big problem. I mean, one of the initial things with security is somebody comes in and audits and says who has access to what. And most of the time when people do audits, they end up finding out that there's a lot of people who have access to stuff where they should not have access to stuff. So if you're starting a network from scratch, everybody, including the president, CEO, whatever, would have access to nothing. And then it would be up to the team to decide, okay, what do people need access to? Okay. So, okay, I want to before we join the domain, and before we go in there and talk about having the client join the domain and then creating a user on the domain controller and talking about permissions and resources. One of the things that I want everybody to kind of understand, and this is kind of basic, but it's important that you take out of this class this as you move forward. When I say server, right? When I say there's a server, what am I talking about? Am I talking about a physical machine all the time? Am I talking about, what could I be talking about? Could this be a server? This computer here? Yeah, it could be, right? It could be. But why would I, what would define that it's a server? Yeah, it has some service running on it that helps or controls or is used on the network, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. I could say that this machine is a DNS server, right? And when I say it's a DNS server, what I mean is that the DNS service, right, is running on that machine. So what if I say, oh, that's my Exchange server? What does that mean? Well, did everybody know what Exchange is? Huh? Yeah. Do you know what that is? Mail. Right, mail. So that would be my email server. Now, could this physical machine be both my Exchange server and my DNS server? Yes, it could be, right? So again, this is part of where people kind of get, when I say server, I could be meaning a physical device. I could now even be meaning a virtual machine in a virtualized environment. But I can also call servers by their service. So sometimes you'll hear that's my SQL server, that's my web server, that's my Exchange server. That could be a physical machine, it could be a virtual machine, but it's really indicative of a service that I'm running on the network in order for my network to function appropriately. You see what I'm saying? Now, the network operating system, like Windows Server, has some of these services built into them, like DHCP and DNS and things like that. Where the client-side operating systems, right, Windows 7, Windows 8, they do not have those services available to them. Okay? So what you end up seeing is that on a network, what ends up happening is there's an available set of services that allow that network to function that can run on various servers. Okay? Now, usually what defines a server, it's usually a lot of RAM, right? More processing power, multiple CPUs, removable hard drives, which are hot swappable, which I can pull out and put in. It's usually defined by some sort of RAID that provides for redundancy on that machine. Okay? So there are things that separate, even though this PC, this normal looking PC, could be used as a server, you're probably going to not see that. I mean, if you watch, but if you interesting, if there's videos on my Twitter account and Google Plus feed, or if you just search Google for Facebook data center or Google data center, they will walk you through. And a Facebook server looks just like a PC. I mean, it's flat, but inside it's a motherboard. They design the hardware. They design it. Runs probably Linux, and it's got hard drives in it, and it's just slotted in, right? And then they're all connected. So again, servers can come in different flavors and serve different functions. But I want to make clear that this physical box could run, if it was running a network operating system, could run multiple services that are provided to the network. Okay? So any questions on that? So right now, what this virtualized server is running is it's acting as a domain controller because we installed Active Directory, and it's also operating as a DNS server because in order to install, if you remember, in order to install Active Directory, we needed to have a DNS server on that network. Okay, so if I go back to my Windows 7 machine, my Windows 7 machine currently right now is a standalone machine. So if I go to Computer and Properties, it is still part of a work group. Okay? But we don't want it to be on a network. It's not going to be part of a work group. What we want it to do is we want to join the domain. We want the client to be part of the domain because we want to be able to manage it and manage the people who are logging into it and manage its security, manage its policies through our network. So remember that Active Directory, just to kind of back up for a second, remember Active Directory is a database, right, that contains all of the objects, right, on a network. And those objects include people logging in, computers, printers, all the different devices that possibly could be part of the network. Well, what we need to do is we need to take this Windows 7 client and we need to join the domain. So, in order to do this, what we do is we make sure that we have our Windows Server machine on, or Windows 7 machine on, and we click on Change Settings here. And down here it says to rename this computer or change its domain or work group, click change. So I'm going to click change. And I'm going to click on domain. And I'm going to type in dovercorp.com, right? Which is the name of the domain that we're using on the Windows Server machine. Okay? And then I'm going to click on OK. And what will pop up will be credentials. Now, can anybody answer me? Who is this asking for? From where, though? Server. Yes. This is this is what basically the server's doing, is saying, who the hell are you, right? Do you have the right or permission to add this client to the domain? Now, we've been kind of using all the same passwords, right? So, but this would be the administrator account that I'm going to use on the server in order to add this to the domain. So I type in administrator, and then I use capital P, the @ SSWORD01, but and then I click on OK. And I get welcome to the dovercorp.com domain. But the key thing to understand is that the credentials that are allowing me to do this are the ones on the server. It's the server saying, who are you? Do you have the permission or the rights to add this client to the domain? Okay. And then once I become part of the domain, it's going to say I need to restart. It's probably a password error, or you misspelled administrator. And is it dovercorp.com? Yeah, it's usually if the error happened. Now you got to use the same password you logged into your server with. So just retype it in. It's typically a password error, or you misspelled administrator. Okay, so again, when my initial login pops up again, if I see this, that's my computer name, right? And so if I were to log in here, where would I be logging into? Nope. 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 If I was this, that's my computer. That would still be me logging in locally to my client. Okay? So, I mean, again, that's the computer name, and then it would be logging in as admin to the local machine. In order to switch that, I need to go to switch user, and I got to go to other user, and then it says there, log on to Dovercorp. Okay? Dovercorp. That's what we named the. Yeah, that's what we named the domain. Yeah, I'll help you guys. You know, we'll finish. I mean, we'll finish by 11 today, and then I'll help you guys. If people still have issues, I can help you one-on-one as we go through it. So, so if I type this in, right? and I'm using the administrator password. Who am I logging into as? On what, though? Yes, on the server. I'm using the credentials that already exist on the server to log into the domain. And if you watch closely, what you'll notice is, if I typed it in right, I'm going to log into the domain. Yeah. I gotta sit down. Why does it keep switching then? Yeah, usually it. Yeah, I'm getting myself confused. What the heck? All right, I don't know what I gotta reset the password, but yeah, I was doing it wrong. Okay, there you go. I'm sorry. I was yeah. So what I've done now is I've logged in as the administrator, and what you'll notice is it's preparing another profile, another local profile. So like my desktop and my it's unique to me, right? So I mean, if I were to change the background or do something like that, this would be a background. This would be a profile, a local profile. Even though I logged into the domain, it's being stored locally on my local machine. Now, as an administrator, you can have profiles roam, meaning you can have all the settings set on the server, and then when somebody logs in, it pulls from the server, and so they could log into any machine and will pull up their profile. Remember, common things in Windows that stick with your profile are what? Wallpaper, settings, bookmarks, my documents, right? I mean, those are all things that are unique to your profile. And if you go into the local machine here, because I don't have them set up to be stored remotely, if I go to here to users, here are the profiles that are set up for these people that have logged in. So the next thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to create a user on the domain, and I'm going to log in from the client as that user. All right. So what we do here is we go to the start menu, and we go to administrative tools and active directories, users, and computers. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to catch up because I'm on the thing. So you have just to wait after if you want to go through it with me. So anyways, here are all my pre-configured users and groups of users. Okay? And Active Directory, this is my basically my containers that I'm storing my objects in on my domain. So users are an object. Here's that computer, right? Here's that object computer that I added, the client machine. It's right here. So this is my client, okay? And what you'll notice if I right click on it and I go to properties, it brings up the properties of that client. It says the name of the computer. It tells me what operating system runs on. It tells me if it's any part of any groups or member of. All these different factors that go into making up the object of that computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new user. So what we're going to do is go to that users folder, and we're going to right click, and we're going to go to new. And then we're going to go new user, and we're going to put ourselves in. Right? And so what we're going to do is this is creating a new object in Active Directory, and it's just a user. And what you'll notice is we're going to add this object to the Dover Corp domain. I'm going to click on Next, and I'm going to say user must change password at next login. All right, and I'm going to put in capital P password 01. Okay. And I want to make sure that the user must change the password at the next login. Okay? And I'm going to click Next, and then I'm going to finish. Okay? So just to reiterate, I've went to the users in Active Directory users and computers. I right-clicked, and I added a new user. I filled it in with my name. I'm just going to use Anthony at dovercorp.com. I clicked on Next. I said the user must change the password at the next login. I filled in password, capital P, password 01. I click on Next. And now I see my user, and I click Finish. And there it is. Here's my user. And if I double click on that user, what you'll notice is here's where I can go ahead and associate more attributes to this object. So this is all stuff that would be kept in Active Directory. So I could put a description here. I could put the office number they're in, their telephone numbers, emails. I can add other things. I can put in their address, their account, their profile, or their profile, telephones, organization. These are all things that would be attributes, right, of Anthony J. Stanislawski. Okay? So those would all be attributes that would be put in to Active Directory that would allow that user or that object to be found by those attributes or to be searched by those attributes on the domain. So you can kind of see the power of Active Directory. As soon as I start adding attributes, I can do that. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my Windows 7, and I'm going to log off. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to log in as somebody else. I forget the. So I'm going to log in to Dover Corp as Anthony. And what you'll notice is, right off the bat, it says the user's password must be changed before logging in. Well, that makes sense, right? Because we had that checked. Okay? We had that checked. So then I'm going to click on OK, and it's going to ask me for a new password. And I'm going to use password, capital password 2. Your password has been changed. And it's going to log me in to dovercorp.com as a user. So now, there I am as the user, Anthony J. Stanislawski. I've logged into the domain as a user here, right? And now, as the administrator, what the administrator would do would give you permissions and rights to all the different resources that would be on the network. And that's above the scope of this class, but that's what you'll be doing in Windows Server. You'll be doing all of those things. You'll be talking about how do I access. So, for example, a lot of times in a corporate environment, right, the administrators lock down the desktop environment, right? So what they do is they say, okay, you can't get to the run command, right? So, for example, I don't want my users to be able to go here and run something. So as a group policy, as an administrator, what I do is I go into my server, I create a group policy for those people, and that group policy gets pushed down to those individuals or those groups of individuals and takes away their command line. I mean their run command, right? And really, I mean that's what it's all about for the rest of the time. It's all about, first of all, administering the services that allow the network to function, right? DNS, DHCP, anything, all the other things that you might or currently have running, and then it's about providing policies, rights, and permissions to the users to restrict them. Right? Or actually, I don't use. You shouldn't use the word restrict. You should use the word give, because really, like I said, the best way to start off thinking about who has access to what is nobody has access to anything, and then I'm giving access to, rather than I'm taking access away. Meaning, you should never start off with the premise everybody has access to everything, and now I'm going to restrict. It should be nobody has access to anything, and I'm going to give permission or access to that, to the individuals. Now, it gets much more complicated, obviously, because if I go back to my domain, what you're going to see is I would have hundreds of users probably, and then all those different hundreds of users would probably be broken up into different groups, and I wouldn't be assigning permissions or rights to an individual. I'd be assigning them to groups of individuals. Okay? And that, depending on how your organization is set up, you might set up your groups by department. They might be, who has access to what. And again, I mean, just to give you an example, I think I mentioned this before, but right, I'm running a company, and I have a graphic design department, and they have this really nice laser color printer, right? Well, again, I don't want everybody having the ability to print to that printer, right? Because that would be a resource on the network. So I'm going to group up my graphic design people, and those are going to be only the people who I give access to, the right to print to that laser printer. Nobody else can. Yes, exactly. And that's what proper network administration is. It's giving permissions. And really, in this right now, you have the environment set up right here now. And again, it's above and beyond this class. But you have the environment, the testbed set up, where you could start putzing around with this. You could right-click on the user, and you could start saying, okay, add to a group, reset. I mean, there's some things that just kind of make sense to what you would end up doing. But if I were to go to a resource here, So for example, if I just go to this picture and I go to properties and I go to security, what you're going to see is that these people are the only people who have access to this, and then these are permissions given to access that. So again, I'm making it out to be less complicated. Making it out to be less complicated than it is. But really, just remember, you always start at this base of creating an object and then giving that object the rights or permissions to access to resources on the network. And again, this is what you do in the Windows Server classes. You make group policies, you manage the services like DNS and DHCP, and you do all of that and learn all about that in the Windows classes. But the concepts, again, if I were to move this to a Linux machine, the concepts of giving permissions and rights and access to things is the same thing, right? It's not done in the same kind of GUI, but it's the same concept. Okay? And that's the key thing to understand. And most places that I've worked at or consulted at, one of their main issues is that they don't understand this idea of giving access, right? Because what happens, here's kind of what happens when I have a network and I have a group of users and somebody outside of that group of graphic designers says to me, I need access to that color printer, and they give me a reason why, and it's a valid reason, and the managers agree. Well, what do I do with them? Yeah, but probably not though. See, this is the stuff that you're going to kind of you learn. Really, what I probably would do is create a group. Another group, and add them to that group that would give them the exception of adding that color printer. And then when they were in no longer need of that, having access to that color printer, I would delete them from that group. Okay? I wouldn't just make them part of it, because they're not part of the graphic design department. They're an exception to the access to that color printer. Now, those exceptions may come up in the future, and then I would have a group created where I would have, I could just plunk people into that group if they needed access to that color printer and remove them. One of the key things with security on a network is most places, when they start giving exceptions, they do exactly what you said, which is just plunk them in the graphic design, and before you know it, you have these people who have access to everything because they've had exceptions made. The administrator, people forget about it, and all of a sudden you have these huge security holes in your network. When we got audited here, or we were in the process, not me, but when MATC brought in people security auditing, the biggest thing they said, the biggest concern was there were tons of people who had access to stuff that they had no reason to have access to, right? So like Cosmo and things like that, maybe an instructor has access to it because they had one time where they had to use it, and then they were not taken out to have access to it. And that's a big security fault. When I worked at Aurora and things like that, I remember being given like a temporary consultant login. But the interesting thing was when I started putzing around with it, I'd have access to all these different things that I did not, at my current role of the consultant, I did not need access to. And probably what they were doing is they just had this consultant, and they just kept that, whatever, depending on what that person needed, they would just give access to. But that's a huge security flaw, right? Because I could go in there, and even though they don't think I am, if I wanted to be nefarious, I could be nefarious. So that's one of the key things that's important. So any questions on setting up? And again, we'll be done a little bit early. So if you have problems individually, I can come around and we can look at it and help you. But I'll help you out after class. My point was to get done by 11 and then help people who ran into issues here. Okay, so the other thing is, remember, this is all screencast. So I've been posting it on the Tony at MATC. So you can go back and I'll post the one from today, but there's right now a series of 3 videos. After today, there'll be a series of 4. So you can go back and watch exactly what we did in class and create this test bed. And again, I suggest that you do this because it helps out with, again, even though I sit down and walk through it for you and show you, the best thing for you to do is to sit down and do it by yourself individually. Okay. And now I'm wondering if it's recording the right way. No. Okay, the couple last things I want to show you. I don't remember if I showed this to you last week or not, and now I'm worried that my screencast is all screwed up because of my resolution. I hope it's not. Yeah, I'll have to see. I may end up having to redo it. Okay, there's a couple features of VMware that you'll end up using as you move through your career here at MATC. And I don't remember if I showed this to you before or not. Did I show you Snapshot? Yeah, maybe. Right. Yeah. So I'll just review it. A snapshot is the ability. It's like in Windows the ability to roll back. So again, if I were to take a snapshot on the server, it would say snapshot 1. I'd take the snapshot. It would save the virtual machine state. And now when I go back to snapshots, I have revert to snapshot 1. So let's say I delete this. And I empty the recycle bin. And I say, oh no, I want to go back. I can go back to the snapshot manager. And I can revert back to snapshot 1. You know. So do you want to restore? Yes. Restore the snapshot. And it restores the picture. Okay. So when you get to Windows, when like you get to the IT with Pat, you get in the networking, the ITnet 198, and you do some of the final labs and things like that. Or if you were doing this on your own and you were screwing around things, you wanted to make sure that you may hose something, you take a snapshot, right? And then you can play to your heart's content. And if you hose something, you can just go back to the snapshot. So for example, like when you do hands-on, if you did a hands-on lab, right? That was progressive. So like you had section 1, section 2, section 3. You could do section 1, right? Take a snapshot, right? And then do section 2, and if you screwed something up, you could always, instead of having to go back to the beginning of the lab, you would go back to the end of section 1. See what I'm saying? So you would be able to, as you progress through a lab, you'd be able to go back and if you screwed up or hosed something, you'd be able to go back, revert back to that snapshot, and carry forward with that. So it's a really cool feature for playing around with things. Now these snapshots take up space, meaning they take up space when you take them on your hard drive, and the more you take, the more space you would end up taking up. So the other things too is what you can do is you can do screen capture, and you can even capture a movie within VMware Workstation. So there's a lot of, for like creating a screencast or demoing something or doing something that you don't want to affect your main machine. The ability to do this all in VM's Workstation is great. Now remember, the other big question we usually get is when I pulled up the Windows 7 machine, you'll notice it said that my activation was going to be up in like 16 days. Now, remember that Windows Server, Windows 7 will run after it's not activated. It's just that it'll nag you. It'll say this isn't a genuine copy of Windows, and then it will also not have any further functionality in regards to updating or anything like that. Okay, but it still works, right? It still works. It's just that you'll get nagged, and like if you did a Windows update, it wouldn't allow you to do it. Okay, but for the purposes of what you guys are doing for learning and all that, setting up the testbed environment on expired and let the machines expire and still use them is not a big deal. Okay, And like I said, I wouldn't key my machines with MSDNA keys on my virtual machine. And then lastly, again, if you're in here and you have a removable hard drive, you can take the ISO images from the ITnet Gold root folder and copy them onto a removable hard drive. Yes, the ISOs. Well, that's a freeware. You can just download that off the website. But here are the ISO images. So you could copy a Windows 7, Windows Server 2003. Not sure why you'd want Vista or XP, but you can copy those ISO images rather than having to down. I mean, again, for the online people, they're available on MSDNA, so you can download them too. Okay. So I'm going to stop the screencast and then talk to you guys. So I got.